Imagine waking up every morning knowing that somewhere on the planet, two superpowers are pointing thousands of nuclear weapons at each other, each one capable of erasing entire cities in seconds. Knowing that one mistake, one misunderstanding, one wrong decision could end human civilization forever. Yet no bombs are falling, no armies are marching, and life seems normal on the surface, because this is not a hot war of bullets and trenches, but a silent war of fear, ideology, and invisible power. A war that lasted for more than 40 years and shaped the modern world. A war we now call the Cold War. When World War II ended in 1945, much of Europe lay in ruins. Cities were destroyed, economies collapsed, and millions of people were homeless and traumatized. And from this chaos, two nations emerged stronger than all others. The United States, rich in industry and confident in democracy, and the Soviet Union, powerful in military strength and driven by communist ideology. And at first, they had been allies against Nazi Germany, but once their common enemy was defeated, their deep differences became impossible to ignore. Because the United States believed in freedom of speech, free markets, and multi-party elections, while the Soviet Union believed in centralized control, state ownership, and one-party rule. And each side feared that the other was trying to dominate the world. On one side stood leaders like Harry Truman, who believed that communism must be contained before it spread across continents. And on the other side stood Joseph Stalin, who believed that Western capitalism was a threat to Soviet security and survival. And between them lay a devastated Europe, desperate for rebuilding, stability, and hope. And when the United States offered financial aid through economic programs, the Soviet Union saw it as a political trap, while the Americans saw Soviet control over Eastern Europe as aggressive expansion. And slowly, almost unnoticed, the world began dividing into two hostile camps. By the late 1940s, this division had hardened as Eastern Europe fell under Soviet influence and Western Europe aligned with the United States, creating what Winston Churchill once called the Iron Curtain. And Germany, once the center of Nazi power, became the symbol of this split, divided into rival states, until in 1961, a concrete barrier was built overnight through the heart of Berlin, separating families, friends, and neighbors, and turning the Berlin Wall into one of the most powerful symbols of the Cold War, a physical reminder that the world itself had been cut in two. While no direct war broke out between the superpowers, their rivalry spread across the globe as they fought indirectly through smaller nations supporting opposing sides in conflicts in Asia, Africa, and Latin America, turning local struggles into international battlegrounds. And nowhere was this more dangerous than in the nuclear arms race, as both sides raced to build more powerful bombs, longer-range missiles, and faster delivery systems, creating a terrifying balance known as mutually assured destruction, where any nuclear war would mean total annihilation for both victor and loser alike. This fragile balance was tested many times, but never more dangerously than in the early 1960s, when the world came closer to nuclear war than ever before. And during this period, the United States was led by John F. Kennedy, a young and charismatic leader facing enormous pressure, as Soviet weapons were secretly placed near American territory. And for days, the world held its breath. Families watched the news in silence. Governments prepared emergency plans, and people wondered if tomorrow would ever come. Until careful negotiation and restraint pulled humanity back from the edge of extinction. As the decades passed, the Cold War continued in waves of tension and relaxation, known as crises and détente, as spies operated in secret, satellites watched from space, athletes competed in politically charged Olympics, and even culture, music, and cinema became tools of influence, while ordinary people on both sides grew up under constant threat, practicing nuclear drills at school, building shelters in their homes, and learning to live with the idea that the end of the world could arrive without warning. By the early 1980s, however, cracks began to appear in the Soviet system, as economic stagnation, technological gaps, and public dissatisfaction weakened its foundations. and a new leader, Mikhail Gorbachev, introduced reforms that aimed to open society and reduce confrontation, choosing dialogue over domination and cooperation over confrontation. And as tensions eased, barriers began to fall, both politically and physically, until in 1989, the Berlin Wall was opened, and people climbed over it, danced on it, and broke it apart with their own hands, showing the world that division could be undone. In 1991, the Soviet Union collapsed, and with it, the Cold War officially ended, not with a final battle, but with negotiations, reforms, and the quiet dismantling of a superpower, leaving the United States as the world's dominant power and opening a new era of globalization, technological growth, and political uncertainty. Yet the legacy of the Cold War remains deeply embedded in modern society, in nuclear weapons that still exist, in military alliances that still shape global politics, in regional conflicts that trace their roots to old rivalries, and in the psychological memory of generations who lived under constant fear, reminding humanity how close it once came to self-destruction. The Cold War was not a story of heroes and villains in simple black and white, but a story of ideology, insecurity, ambition, and survival, of leaders struggling to protect their nations while risking the fate of the planet, of ordinary people living extraordinary lives under extraordinary pressure, and above all, a warning from history that when fear replaces trust and power replaces cooperation, even peace can become a battlefield. And today, as new tensions rise and old rivalries return in different forms, the story of the Cold War still whispers to us across time, reminding us that the most dangerous wars are not always the ones we can see, but the ones we are constantly trying not to fight.